Bom dia a todos. Bem-vindos ao Best Practice Day.
Hello everyone, welcome back to our Staufen stage. Welcome online to the second edition, the second episode of this special webinar edition promoted by STAUFEN.Brasil. Before we start, please let me know if you can hear me. Write down in the chat, please. I also want to invite everyone to interact with us in the chat. Please send in the chat of this online session on YouTube or LinkedIn which country you are from and the company, your company's name. It's also a good opportunity for you to grow your network. As we check it in the registration data, we have here today people from more than 30 countries. What a record. Thank you very much for being here today with us. Before we start, I'd like to ask you to subscribe to our Staufen channels on both LinkedIn and YouTube. Just click on the like button, and enjoy the upcoming content. Let me introduce myself and our company. I'm Luciana, Marketing and Academy Manager in Staufen Brazil. We are a transformation consultancy. We believe that inside every company there is an even better one. Our main goal is to help companies to reach high performance through lean and very professional work of our team of consultants and coaches. This year, our company in Brazil is celebrating 20 years of operation. For this reason, till the end of 2021, we are promoting this very special webinar series. We are bringing to this virtual stage some keynote speakers of the last editions of our Staufen Congress Best Practice Day. So today we have gathered here for this special second episode 2 lean experts to bring to the light about how we can improve the financial performance of our companies and engage people with lean. To invite our guests and to moderate this session, I'd like to welcome Dario Spinola, Managing Director of STAUFEN.Brasil. Dario has more than 20 years of experience in lean consulting and coaching. Welcome, Dario, and thank you so much for being here today.
Hello. Thank you, Luciana.
So now let's introduce our guests. Dr. Michael Ballé is a lean management practitioner, business writer, and author. He's co-author of the Gold Mine Trilogy, the Lean Strategy, and the Lean Sensei. Please come with us, Michael Ballé.
Hello.
Welcome. And now, Mr. Art Byrne is a Lean expert and also a Lean author. He has served as CEO for many years and implemented Lean principles in more than 30 companies in 14 countries during the past 30 years. He's author of the book, The Lean Turnaround. Welcome, Art. Thank you so much for being here today. Welcome for everyone.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the conference.
Thank you. Dario, it's up to you now.
All right. Thank you, guys. It's by seeing that images on the videos, it's bring us good memories. We had Art Byrne in 2019, the Best Practice Day in Brazil. Michael Ballé in 2017. So it's good. It was a great moment having in presence, let's say, doing this Best Practice Day. This year, we can't do the Best Practice Day in presence. So we have this sort of online and virtual session of that. It's such an honor for having you guys here. Two icons of the Lean community. Two people. Yes, you are icons, the gurus. And I know, Art, thank you so much. I know you have traveled the whole day from the US to Japan. Art is right now just landed in Japan 3-4 hours ago, had 3 hours procedures of getting through the airport, COVID, let's say, all these procedures that is necessary. And thank you so much. I know it's late night for you, very late night, and we appreciate very much. Michael is okay. He's in Paris right now, 4 p.m. It's fine, right, Michael? Thank you so much. Well, let's go straight to the point. The whole idea here is we have an open conversation regarding Lean, how to engage people for really developing and getting improvements on financial performance of the companies. We're gonna have initial talks, and then whoever is willing to send questions, please share with us through the chat box your questions. We will try to pick as much as possible and have Michael and Art to answer, give their comments, their point of view, their recommendations, so on and so forth. So, Art, let me start with that. You have turned around many companies and became them financially profitable and sustainable for the future. How do you engage people?
Well, people is the main thrust of Lean. Really, the thing you're trying to turn around is the people. I always say Lean is all about people, and to do that, I think it requires several different steps. One, of course, the first one is just leadership. If you don't have leadership, it's hard to get people to change at all. They're just going to stay with their old ways. And up front, you've got to communicate very clearly what it is you're trying to do, why you want to do this, what results you expect, and most importantly, what's in it for the people. What should they expect? Because that's, when they say, well, gee, we're going to make a big change, everybody wants to know, what does that mean for me? And so it's really important to communicate that up front. And the leader really has to lead. They have to be out front, hands-on, on the shop floor, showing people what to do, that kind of thing. You can't just stay in your office and delegate things. The next step, I think, really is we're trying to go from batching, which is the traditional approach that most companies use, to flow. And in order to do that, I think one of the first steps you should take is really to convert yourself to a value stream organization and away from the functional organizations that most companies are organized into. Next, and if you do that, by the way, that's going to bring the customer much closer to the people. If you think about how most traditional companies operate, they make things to a forecast. So the people on the shop floor or making things they're not really engaged with the customer. They never see the customer. They just see the forecast. Whereas if you have a really good pull system, and as orders come in throughout the day, they hit the shop floor, and the people can see those orders live, then they're very connected to the customer. And if you can connect your people to your customer, you're going to really start to engage them and make them understand why we're doing this and why it's important. So value stream organization is very important. The next thing really in my mind is you have to set some very clear stretch goals. You can outline what you want to do, but companies that are lean compete on their operational excellence goals. And I think it's really important to set very stretch goals at the beginning so that people are aware of what you're trying to do and communicate them very clearly. At Wiremole, when I was CEO, we had just 5 things. We said we wanted 100% on-time customer service, not 97.2%, but 100. We wanted a 50% reduction in defects every year. We wanted a 20% productivity gain every year. We wanted a standard of 20 times inventory turns. We were at 3, by the way, when we started, so this was a little shocking to people. And we wanted the visual controls and the 5S everywhere in the business. So those were the things we were going to run the company on, and that's really how we ran the company. Everything, we had a weekly meeting with all the value stream leaders and to review how they were doing on those 5 goals. So we wound up with almost all the people in the company focused on those 5 things. So that really helps us to engage the people because they know what it is we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it. And then the real thing that gets people involved, I think, is the whole process of Kaizen. You know, we just ran a lot of Kaizens. We were doing Kaizen. And I remember when we first started working with the Japanese consultants, all of whom had spent their whole career at Toyota, and we'd ask them, "Oh, what's it like to work at Toyota?" They would just laugh, and then they'd just say, Kaizen. So we followed that same approach, and the Kaizen approach really engages your people. It teaches them how to see things differently. It helps them to remove the waste, and it really gets them on board with the changes because, for example, we took a punch press setup from 3 hours and 10 minutes to 1 minute. And a lot of the best ideas on that came from the operators themselves. So, you know, if you can take something from 3 hours and 10 minutes to 1 minute, you're going to really engage the people, I can tell you, because they're not upset with that. They're really happy that, gee, it used to take me 3 hours and 10 minutes to do this. Now I can do it in a minute. This is great. Thank you very much. So all those steps are important, but I think the key thing is you just have to remember that lean is all about people and trying to engage and convert the people.
Right. I like what you said, giving them stretch goals. I believe that stretch goals can give people some purpose, right? So people by defining purpose and at the same time giving them direction. Stretch goals coming from the strategy, doing deployment or Hoshin can read policy deployment, so they can work on the same direction, right? And get them to really engage, work on the same direction, and with company's purpose or the same purpose to work on together. We see many companies working, sometimes giving to the people the freedom to work, but work on improvements randomly without a purpose or without stretch goals. This is a very good point you mentioned. Michael, do you believe that what's the difference of blaming culture and engaging people? If you can do a parallel of companies with blaming culture, and then at the same time we want to engage people to work on lean improvements, will you comment on that?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure anybody wants to go into a blame culture. I think I agree with everything Art said. I mean, this is lean. This is the practice, but we have to backtrack. Most managers are expected to be first financial managers. I mean, if you're in the case like Art, where the CEO gets it, many of these problems disappear, but not all of them, because some of the people you hire from outside come from the expectation that they need to handle their budget, and which they do need, and be financial managers. Now, if you look at the structure of the P&L, first you separate recurring costs, normal costs of doing business, and cost and profit, results, from financial results that you have from both placing money on the markets and paying debt or something like that, and then exceptional costs. Now, if you have this in your mind, lean doesn't make much sense, because what they try to do is they try to reduce as much as they can their normal recurring costs, and this has consequences. For instance, it's very easy to cut down on maintenance. We see it everywhere. It's very easy to put pressure on people, to have less people than you need. And I agree with Art. To engage people, you need to, in my terms, I think this is what Art meant, you need to have some sense making, which is the purpose you give the company. This is what we're here. But you need meaning making, which is for each individual person. What does it mean for me? So if you align the sense making of the company and the meaning making for the person, but I think you have to align also the resources. The people have to see that you're giving them the resources, like Art was saying, Kaizen. Well, there are the consultants, there's the time, there's the resources, so people can see that it's credible, that they have the resources. Now, if you go back to the P&L, you have managers who think that if they reduce the recurring costs to the maximum, without consideration for the exceptional costs they're creating, this is what is expected of them. And this is something that if you want to go into lean, you need to really fight from the outside. There are no such thing as exceptional costs. There's only costs that you create because you didn't anticipate well what was going on. Because at the end of the day, it all comes out of the bottom line. But so the blame culture comes from accidentally from this idea that you reduced recurring costs, you're doing your job, something terrible happens, event horizon, anything, suddenly you have all these things that happen that come out of your bottom line and the company is not working. And then you have to have somebody to blame. It can't be you because you've done your job. So I think to go into this idea that you have financial results from developing people, we need to backtrack and understand what the financial results are. And here there are two big ideas, and I'll pass on back to Art, which is to say, first, we understand that there's no such thing as exceptional costs. They're just costs of our mistakes and costs of our poor anticipation, and it's fine. Sometimes we don't have a crystal ball, but if we had anticipated better, there would be less exceptional cost. And the second thing, the recurring costs come from physical things, physical operations, which is what Art is saying, that you need to go into the actual process and actual Kaizen, because the physical costs are not numbers on a sheet of paper. It's a price by a quantity. And you need to understand that what you're affecting, these 5 things that Art is talking about, are the physical quantities, not just the cost. So I think that one of the difficulties we have is that if you have a manager who understands the proper place of finance and wants to improve the bottom line, at the end of the day, the bottom line, then lean is easy in a way because they know what they're doing. But in many cases, we have managers who don't understand finance that way. So they think their job is to reduce the recurring costs, and then that all the exceptional costs they create is somebody else's problem, or even now in the period that we have, that you can hide it all in the financial results.
It's a very good bridge of what you were speaking, Michael, of the recurring costs and exceptional costs.
Well,
with the situation. Yeah, sure, Art, please.
I'd just like to add something to what Michael said, because I agree with what he's saying. And I think you can think of any company, manufacturing, non-manufacturing, doesn't matter what you do. You can be a hospital, whatever. There's only 3 things involved, right? It's a bunch of people and a bunch of processes trying to deliver value to a set of customers. That's all it is. There's no way around those 3 things. And so if you focus on the processes and not on your results, then changing the processes and eliminating the waste in the processes, that's what's going to give you the best results. That's what's going to give you your future results. When people focus on make the month, then they're only focusing on something that already happened. They close the books 3 weeks later and try and focus on that. Whereas if they change the processes, and so I always just say, focus on your processes, not your results. That's what's going to drive the future results.
I think that this is very wise, because at the end of the day, you have to understand what you can control and what you can't control. You can't control the results directly. You can try to. That's what they do with the financial control and all these things, correct the variances, but you can't. What you can control is the processes. You can control the physical things that you do. Right. So again, we need to clarify this and say, don't try to. This is again back to the blame culture or the lying culture. Don't try to control what you can't control. The results will be what they are. The results are a calculation. You can control the processes, and you can't control the people, but you can certainly bring them on board and engage them so that they control the processes. And I think so. There is in what Art is saying, there's a deep wisdom here about what you can and cannot control. And of course, if you control your processes and if you engage your people, the results will be fine. The results will be fine. But it takes an understanding from both the senior leaders and the middle managers that this is what you're trying to do. Because to be honest, if you're a manager, I think you'd agree, Art, make the month is apparently it's a safer, easier way to do the job, because you don't have to concern yourself with reality. All you have to do is to blame people when they haven't reached their OKRs or objectives or whatever you want to call it.
Right, and people do a lot of stupid things to try and make the month, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, and this lack of knowledge, and let's say financial knowledge, and especially lean experience or lean knowledge, we are facing this situation worldwide with the pandemic. And I see many companies doing like a slaughtering, just cost-cutting engineering in maintenance, as you said, Michael, or some direct costs on operations.
Dario, we know the stupid things financial managers do. We know that they cut costs on maintenance. We know they postpone investments. We know they use how do you call it? Not suppliers, but they outsource activities because they can get a better deal. They batch everything they can because they want a volume. They will know this. But I'm also very interested in the silly things that the lean people do. Because we have a bunch of silly things, and most of these silly things is not being interested in the finance or the strategy or the business. And it's equally silly because, again, it's about communication. I mean, financials are a reality. Business is a reality. And we need to have our lean people get out of a very narrow understanding of the tools to understand where it fits, and back to what Art was saying on the purpose and what you were saying on the purpose, but where it fits with the business, and not, for instance, sometimes I think I was listening to Ritsuo Shingo, Tsujiyo Shingo's son, who spent his career at Toyota. And he was saying,
we met him together in China, right? Remember?
Yeah, absolutely.
10
years ago. And he was saying something fantastic. He was saying, okay, situation normal, TPS is very good. Situation abnormal, think deeply and be flexible. So for instance, right now we're running out of parts. We have supply chain disruption. We have these problems. I work with a company that they have no more, they're traders, but they can't find anything on the market. And sometimes, you have the lean orthodox that are going crazy saying, keep everything the same, don't change the camera. And sometimes you say, hey, no, right now we have to buy everything we can because there's no more of it. And just look at it, So I think it goes both ways. I think in the lean world, we understand perfectly the silly things people do to make the month. But I think we have our share of silliness as well, and that it's well worth discussing.
Yeah, let us make a question here. We know how important it is and crucial is to involve the whole company in the lean transformation. However, we still see many companies struggling in terms of financial results, operational performance, by only trying to do lean in the production side. And why should a senior leader, CEO, CXO, take on the implementation throughout the entire organization? And Art, you as a former CEO of many companies, what would you say about it?
Well, I think that one of the big sins that we see all the time when you talk about lean is that I think over 95% of the companies who head down the lean path do so because they think it's a cost reduction program. And, so their focus is going to be only on reducing costs. And when they think of that, they just delegate it down to the VP of operations and say, you get the cost out. Use these lean tools and lower my costs. That's what I want you to do. And the rest of my organization can just keep doing what they're doing. But I'll give you an example of why that's stupid. When I first went to WireMold, I knew that we were going to implement a very rapid lean implementation, and that meant we were going to try and have pull and try and level load the factory so that we could be more efficient, et cetera, et cetera. So one of my first questions when I got there was, what percentage of our sales ship in the last week of the month? And any manufacturing company can ask yourself that. What percentage of your sales ship in the last week of the month? And the answer was 50%. So I said, well, this obviously can't work. I want to level load the factory and ship the same percentage every day, basically, if I can get there. It's going to take me a long time to get there, but that's where I'm headed. So I can't have 50% of the sales go in the last week of the month. Why is that happening? So when you look into that, what you find is that in our case, it was our sales terms, our own sales terms were incenting our distributors, and we sold about 70% through distributors and 30% to OEMs, was incenting all of our distributors to order in the last week of the month because they had some financial incentive to do that. They didn't have to pay until the 10th of the following month. And so I said, well, we got to change the sales terms. We got to get sales and marketing involved in this because I can't deliver value to my customer, which is my objective, if 50% of the sales are going to go in the last week of the month, because I have to batch. And if they order that much in the last week of the month, it's not good for them either. They have extra inventory, they make mistakes, they make errors, things get damaged, they want to return stuff. It's a big mess. So you really have to get everything involved. And if you want to say just do lean in operations and not deal with sales and marketing and have 50% the last week of the month, you're going to have a problem. Same thing as if you want to keep your systems the same and not change the systems, because everybody runs with various computer systems these days. But an MRP system is a batch system, and a pull system is quite different. And MRP is push, and a pull system is pull, and that's Kanban system. And you can do that without having to have big computer models and all this other kind of stuff. So when you're trying to switch from push to pull, every part of the organization has to be involved, because if you allow sales and marketing to continue selling in a big batch mode, to give volume discounts, to try and bring in next month's orders into this month in order to make the month, it'll kill the factory. There's nothing the factory can do about it. You can have a great factory, and sales and marketing, if they're off doing some batch thing, they can still drown the factory. So you really have to look at the whole organization and do it across the organization. Everybody has to be involved.
I think this is a side effect of a silo organization, right? They're vertical and functional, organized.
It is. But before the silo, again, you have to understand that when we're talking about cost, we're talking about complete cost. There's the bottom line at the end of the day that every cost in the company comes into there. And it's the same thing that when you're talking about people, we're talking about the complete person. You're not just talking about the role. You're talking about the complete person, the whole person. I think one of the things I really enjoy in Art's book is the every moment that he's talking to the complete person. I love the poems and all these things that happen. That it's not just the job, it's the person. And so if we're on costs, all the costs end up in the bottom line. But yes, they're divided in silos, they're divided in chunks, and they're divided in budget. So what tends to happen is the reason we have a pull system, it was thought as a cooperation system, as a collaboration system, because what the pull system does is that it makes you understand, exactly like in what Art was saying, the impact of decisions on one side of the organization and in the other side of the organization. For instance, we're seeing it at the moment. There is the example of Art of Make the Month, but there's also product development. I mean, any factory can absorb all sorts of changes, but it can only absorb them one at a time. So you can't introduce, you can introduce products quickly, but you can't introduce them at the same time, because mostly you're running on the same special resources, and they can cycle their work quickly because they're good at it. But if you give them 3 things to do at the same time, everything stops. So same thing, you have poor planning at product integration, no takt time of product interruption, that will completely mess up the downstream. Now, interestingly enough, it back flushes, because when you start messing up with a supply chain, which few people look at, you have stoppages come from suppliers that go all the way to the fact that you can't make the month. You can't make the numbers. For instance, at the moment, the last 2 Gambas I was on, the companies in France are missing about 10 to 20% turnover. The orders are there, but because of the post-COVID, we can't find the people. So we literally can't find the people to put in front of the machines. So we can't get the production out. The orders are there, and our lead times are exploding, and everybody's yelling because we didn't know how to sort the how to get people in the factory. So again, it's the difficulty here is that you can be a very aggressive manager. It's simple to focus on siloed costs and budgets. You can make a career out of it. You just have to be an asshole. You just grab people and you say, here, make the budget or else. And then you go to somebody else and there's a different silo and they say, here, make the budget or else. And then to make it work, you give them incentives on making their budget. So everybody's going to try to push silly decisions on each other. And what people miss is the curiosity to understand that all of this comes out of the same pocket in the end. And that if we're eating off each other's pockets all the time, collectively, it just doesn't make any sense.
Right. I think one thing that one difficult as well is the difficult of the companies of having everyone in the organization, product engineering, supply chain, or sales, or whoever else, to work towards the customer, to understand the customer needs, what the customer problems that happen at the customer when they're working at the silos.
That is something that we have to understand in the lean world. This is what we have TPS. You have a number of, how do you call this, arm wrestling? You will always be arm wrestling. Always be. So every time you say, we need to give, as Art said, we need to give more value to the customer, somebody will say, screw the customer, take the money. Every time you say, listen, we need to reduce lead time because it's going to be better for the future, somebody will say, in this case, screw the lead time, just batch it. Every time you say, we need to react more quickly to quality problems right now and then because we need to understand it, somebody will say, oh, come on with quality. I mean, look, just ship. So every time you say, we need to engage people more into Kaizen, somebody will say, let's do the work first and then see if we have time for Kaizen. And every time somebody will say, listen, let's be more sincere in your communication with workers because we need more trust. Somebody will say, but look, what we're planning an IPO. How can we possibly tell them that? So it's not a moral thing. It's understanding that this arm wrestling is normal and will always happen. The real difficulties I see CEOs
It's a
struggling with.
paradigm. It's a paradigm.
Yeah, it makes sense. Sometimes. I mean, the argument, the other argument makes perfect sense. It's also pragmatic and concrete because it's all about tomorrow. It's a balance between tomorrow and today, and burn your boats. And some people make a career out of it. It's not nonsensical. The difficulty I see CEOs have is surrounding themselves with people they can have the conversation with. Because what you have is people are extreme in one side or extreme in the other side. But as a leader, what you really need is somebody you can have the conversation. So somebody who understands TPS well enough, so you don't have to debate everything on your own in your mind. You can go to them and say, I can imagine, Art, that Ori would have a lot of pushback on some issues, and
Not too much.
not too much, but you need somebody you can talk to, not pushback just for pushback's sake.
But you know, when we were talking about how do you get everybody engaged, and you know, pull really helps with that. Value stream organization helps that. But as an example, we had a couple of silos. We had a purchasing department, and we had a production planning department. Well, you know, it just turns out that purchasing was trying to buy something that production planning wasn't planning on making. And so you wound up with a lot of inventory, and you never had the stuff you needed. So we got rid of both departments. And each value stream manager had what we call the buyer planner, a person that was responsible for both the buying and the planning. The whole theory was if it was all in one person, they probably couldn't fake themselves out. Right. And that worked really, really well because they just focused on one value stream. And the value stream for us was a product family. And so we went from something like 340 raw material suppliers down to about 40. And we got rid of the purchasing department. We got rid of the production planning department. And we just did it through these buyer planners who reported to the value stream managers. But this helped us coordinate the whole pull aspects of everything, right? We printed Kanban as orders came in throughout the day. We printed those orders. Once they reached a Kanban quantity, the Kanban card would print on the shop floor next to the machines that made the product. And so the worker on the floor could see the orders coming in hour by hour throughout the day. And we could respond and start to make the product we needed to make within an hour or two of when we got to a Kanban quantity. And with the buyer planners all tied into that, everything was linked together. We didn't have Department A doing one thing and Department B. And then at the end of the day, everybody goes like this, right? Oh, I could have done it, but this guy didn't get me the stuff, and I can't do it. No excuses. The whole idea was no excuses. We don't want any excuses. And the value stream organization took away the excuses that we had to listen to before.
I think you just answered one question that came up here, is asking what are the key steps to switch a organization from a function structure into a value stream organization. I think that's those are
the key step is understand Kanban, understand pull.
Pull system.
Here's the thing: modern organizational theory is finally understanding that performance is linked to collaboration. Collaboration needs what Art was saying. It needs purpose and trust. Okay. So
well, Dario, just think about what you just said. In my opinion, and this is based on my experience in a lot of different companies, this happens over and over and over. A traditional company, because it's organized functionally, has between 25 and 40% too many people. It has between 40 and 50% too much floor space. It has 5 to 6 times more inventory than it needs. It has long lead times, and it usually has some systemic quality problems, because if it takes 6 weeks to make something, you know, and you have a problem, it could have occurred 6 weeks ago. It's almost impossible to solve that problem when you're dealing with a 6-week lead time. So those are just the structure, just the functional structure creates those 5 things. And the reason, that's why you see lean companies getting such tremendous results, because all they're doing is getting rid of all those functional problems that exist from that structure. The structure itself creates most of the waste and cost that exists in traditional companies, in my opinion. and experience.
The thing is, a functional company works badly, but works. A bureaucracy.
Yeah.
The good thing about bureaucracy is that you can organize very large things. So the results are not the results are completely suboptimal, but at least it runs. Now, the difficulty with lean is that in order to go to value stream, you have to walk through a very narrow door. You have to make the effort to understand what is a pull system and Kanban. And if you really look at the lean movement, every book that you read is about saying, hey, you know what? You can do lean without learning about Kanban. Just focus on the values. But you can't. You can't, because Kanban is what threads through the silos. It's the thinking that gets you to do this, what Art saying, you merge the planning and the
Creates the
and
interlink.
purchasing, but you will never think about it. It will never come into your mind to do so if you don't have a hands-on practical understanding of how Kanban works and doesn't work, actually. So there is everybody's on about values and everybody's on about all sorts of things, but there is a narrow door you have to walk through. It's a narrow door. It's hard and takes you into this other room. You need to understand how a pull system works. So
And
at
many
some
people-
point, there has to be a personal investment in opening a bloody book or going to see a company that has one and figuring it out for yourself. And every person I know, I think Art included from reading his book, has had the first enlightenment seeing a very simple Kanban work between two separate entities. Every person, every guy I know who've transcended lean, who've done lean transformations, you go back far enough, at some point they say, oh, I remember there was this factory and this factory, there was this office and this office. And we connected these two with a very simple, bad Kanban. And suddenly something incredible happened. The OTD increased and the inventory disappeared. So this is a difficulty. Is a lot of people trying to make lean easy, convincing others that you can do lean without having this fundamental insight. And I honestly don't think you can.
And this fundamental insight is not only for production companies, because the pull system applies everywhere, to IT, code development, to service company.
IT is very interesting because they've invented the IT Kanban, which is the opposite of Kanban. So they have this board where they have these columns, and what they're really showing is backlogs of post-its so that they can reschedule all the time. And it's fantastic. It's really funny. They call it Kanban because you can move through the process, but that's not what Kanban is. Kanban is one at a time, and when you've done one, pick another. And there's no rescheduling. It's so IT is funny because they found one way to call Kanban something that is literally push and the opposite of Kanban. And don't try having this conversation with them because they just go nuts because they say, how can we manage without a backlog? Well, it's like, how can you manage without inventory? It's the same problem.
I'm sorry, yes. But what I mean is that the pull system thinking can be applied everywhere, either in engineering, in purchasing department, everywhere. The thinking of what do next step need, what is needed from in the next step.
Can apply everywhere, but you need a few fundamental insights. One of the insights that you need is you can't just look at the material flow, you have to look at the information flow. Now, this is a very deep insight because when we know, as organizational studies show, that your organization, and actually every example Art has used from his experience shows that the organization will follow the communication structure no matter what you do. So you need to understand that the complete company is a material flow and an information flow. The moment you realize that, suddenly all of these Kanban things and pull system make sense because you're starting to push on the information flow, not the material flow. And again, this is why ERPs don't make any sense because the way they handle information creates the inventories and the backlogs.
Right.
But if you haven't had, again, this insight, And again, this insight, usually you have it from hands-on experience with a very simple Kanban, seeing the cards come, seeing people deliver, and then you feel it, and then you get it. If you haven't had this insight about the information flow, you keep doing what the IT guys do, which is go back to pushing work without understanding that you could be pulling it.
Yeah, at Wiremo, we acquired 21 different companies over 10 years. And of course, every one of them came with a different IT system. And so we needed an enterprise ERP system to put in place. And as we did that, we said there's one requirement of the ERP system. We do not want to use scheduling on MRP. You can only schedule on Kanban. Because if you allowed the ERP system to run off of an MRP, which most of them run off of that's the key foundation to those systems. If you allow that to happen, then you're going to batch. Those are all designed for batch. And, if I'm the guy that's coming in to put in the new ERP system, and I go to Michael and I say, you're making this widget here. How long does it take you? What's the lead time? And he says, well, it takes me about 6 weeks. So, okay, that's all the information I need. I go back to my little cubicle and I'm going to program that in. But I can't program in 6 weeks because it has to mesh with all the other things we're doing.
I have no idea what's going to happen in 6 weeks.
Yeah, so I don't know that it's always going to happen. He told me he can do it in 6 weeks. So I'm gonna give a little cushion here. I'm going to program it in for 8 weeks. So now I just spent $20 million on a new system. And I went from a 6-week lead time to an 8-week lead time that I can't change because the system won't let me. And you say, well, gee, did you go backwards or did you go forward? Well, in my opinion, you went way backwards, but you spent a ton of money doing it. And it was just all stupid because you weren't thinking about it right.
An example of what you were saying outside of manufacturing, which I find fascinating, is a hospital ward.
Oh, yeah.
Hospitals are saturated. You have never enough beds and you have these long queues everywhere. But when you look at the ward is obsessed with patient entry. The ward never looks at how patients go out. Now, what actually happens is that you have more beds that you need, but you don't know how to get some patients out because of the cooperation with the structures outside the hospital. The easy patients will leave at the right time. Their family comes, they walk out, it's fine. But the difficult patients, sometimes there's no one there. So they stay in the beds longer than it's needed. So they create all this backflush, and then you have the lines on the emergency line. So
Right.
This is a typical case where you need to understand, you need to pull patients out. Now, I'm not suggesting that you're throwing people out on the streets, which I'm sure many managers would have thought out. I'm suggesting that this takes you to another place, which is where's your coordination with the outpatient structures and the other structures out there, and you create an office that starts talking to them.
Well,
It was really interesting.
And creates a flow, right?
It creates a flow. It was really interesting in Japan because we had a Japanese hospital explain to us that they were actually calling GPs when they saw they were monitoring the flow of patients from GPs, from doctors, and they were calling the doctors when they saw there was something changing in the flow of patients. Say, you're not referring as many patients, or you're referring a lot of patients to us at this moment. What is going on out there in the out system? Because and this is really pool system applied to a hospital to a degree I've never seen. Because what they were trying to figure out is this a momentary change in capacity, or is something real happening?
Art.
I've done a fair amount of work in hospitals, and one of the things that just jumps out at you is hospitals have natural value streams. Yeah. I mean, there's a natural value stream of everything related to the heart. There's another natural value stream of everything related to bones. Maybe there's a value stream related to babies or things like that. So they have natural value streams, but they're not organized that way. They're not organized that way at all. They're organized in silos. Even inside of, let's say, the heart value stream, they have cardiologists, they have heart surgeons, they have heart PAs, they have cardiac trained nurses. They're all separate organizations. They're not part of a team. And guess what? The heart value stream, if you have a $500 million hospital, the heart value stream probably accounts for $200 million worth of that. And you know what? No one is in charge of that. There's not a single person in the head that's the head of the heart value stream. And so they just all do this all the time. And the patients suffer. You make a mistake with the information flow and someone can die. It's just the craziest thing. It's the craziest thing you've ever seen. I once did a Kaizen at a hospital, and I never knew what they wanted me to do. I show up and I volunteered my time at a hospital in Hartford, Connecticut. And I said, what do you want to work on this week? They said, we want to work on mental patients in the emergency room. And I said, gee, I don't know anything about mental patients in the emergency room. I said, well, wait a minute. Let's just think about this logically. What's the takt time? What's the rate at which mental patients enter the emergency room? What's the flow? Do we have flow of them? What do you do with them when they show up? Is there standard work? Is there any pull? Can we pull them through the process? And we solved that problem within the week. The biggest problem they had was when they got the mental patients in, they were causing all kinds of disruption in the emergency room because they're wandering around, they're bothering people because the wait times were really long. So we just segregated these people immediately they had some extra space, and we just segregated them into that space and locked the door so they couldn't come back out and bother everybody else. And then inside of that space, we could try and get pull and flow and standard work to work. And so that they had a process of how do you move them through? What do you do with them? So that the fundamentals of lean apply any place, whether you're in a hospital like that or any place else.
Art, I have an interesting question. How does Gemba can support cost management? What are your personal experience on that? Doing Gemba, go and see Gemba, Genshi Genbutsu.
Well, most companies, when they do cost, they do standard cost systems, which were invented a long time ago, and really they give you bad information anyway, because I always like to say standard cost systems can't be understood by humans, because not even the finance guys that put them together really understand, because you've got 6 or 7 different variances, variance from this, variance from that, variance from this and that. And what are they varying from? Well, they're varying from the budget you put together last fall, which wasn't a real thing in the first place. So you got variance on top of variances and all kinds of assumptions based upon something that was never real in the first place. So think about that. And you're going to run the company and try and make the month based on something that's stupid. And so in addition, the standard cost system incentivizes almost everything that we're trying to get rid of with lean. The standard cost system incentivizes you doing more of it. For example, it incentivizes building inventory. If you want to make this month's results look good, build the items that have the biggest, the biggest absorption in them. Get the most absorption out of them. So it doesn't matter whether the customer ordered them, but if I can build the items with the biggest absorption at the end of the month, my numbers will look pretty good. I can't ship anything to anybody, and I'm building excess inventory. But if I'm just focused on the numbers, I'm going to build to absorption, and I'm going to increase my inventory. Where with lean, we're trying to get rid of inventory. It's the biggest waste there is. So you've got to switch early on, in my opinion, very early on. You've got to switch from standard cost accounting to lean accounting. My finance guy at Warmo is a very brilliant guy and a very good lean thinker. And we invented or created what we call lean accounting of sorts, that you look at the real numbers and what's happening in real time. It's like a checkbook.
Can we visualize this lean account, this visualization at the shop floor, so that when we do Gemba, this can be transparent over there?
Right. Well, it's really, I think of it like, I call it like checkbook accounting, which means if I spent the money in this period, I'm going to expense it in this period. I'm not going to move it into next period and back and forth based upon inventory growth and all that stuff. I'm just, you're going to see the real costs. And also, we looked at, people do the standard cost accounting of each item that they sell out to 4 digits. And if you ask any company how many people trust the actual standard cost of each item that you sell, no hands will go up. Nobody believes it, right? Because there's too many assumptions in it. So we said, well, then it's kind of stupid to waste all the money and cost to do that. So we just took it down to sort of a variable cost basis where we understood the raw material in the product, we understood the labor that was in the product, and we could assign a square footage cost or whatever you might want to call a small overhead cost. Not much though, not very much. So we knew very clearly what the costs were down to a certain level. We didn't use this for pricing. Price has to be set in the marketplace, not based upon your cost plus some margin you want to have, which is the way the standard costing system works. So we understood really early on when we were having problems on the shop floor, we didn't have to go to accounting to figure that out. We knew that we had problems on the shop floor, and we were fixing those through Kaizen way ahead of any numbers showing up. Whereas the standard cost system, 3 months after the end, 3 weeks after the end of the month, they close the books and then say, "Oh, look what happened." And you don't want to wait that long. You're just looking at something that already happened. It doesn't make any sense.
I had a personal experience just one comment, Michael. I had a personal experience in one company in China where they switched from this standard cost into the value stream P&L.
Yeah.
And rather than a time frame of 1 month, 4 weeks plus 3 weeks to close the books,
Yep.
to do it in a daily basis. So that could engage and see what really was happening, what's going on in one, let's say, value stream. It was quite interesting.
We did the same thing. We looked at it by value stream cost, only down to a certain level, though. We didn't try and allocate everything in there. And that gave us a very clear idea. And we went from closing the books in 3 weeks to about 3 days, same kind of thing.
But if you're back to the question, you're in a company that doesn't have lean accounting, so you're a normal company, and you're on the shop floor. What you can always do is look at the true cost, which is you take the best minute or the best hour or the best day, and you say, okay, what does it look like if that was the case every minute, every hour, every day? It's random. You just take the best hour and project that we're doing the best hour every day. So this is where we're at, and then this is the best day every day, and this is where we're at. And with that number, you see the gap between your real cost, not your real cost, the cost in your books, and what you have, and you ask yourself, what are we doing wrong that explains this gap? And it's just always fascinating because first there's no blame because people are doing things that make sense. They're not sensible, but they make sense. They explain things. But this is how this is how I attack cost in the game, but very concretely. Everything you say, you look at something, you look at the variation, and you say, okay, what is the true potential here? What is the thing that we know it's not out of a hat? We know we have the best day. That's a fact. If you're skittish about it, you can have the best repeatable day. You have twice the best day. Okay. And then you start having this figure, and then you ask yourself, why is it not every day the best day? And when you backtrack on this, you realize that you're doing a lot of things, often in other departments, to make sure the best day doesn't happen again.
To eliminate what is preventing from doing the best day again.
So to answer the question, the skill to learn on the shop floor is, what is the true potential? You can see this in operations. If things would work in a continuous flow without any quality issues, without the 4M problems, the best thing that what would it look like? And why is it not that way?
Yeah. Guys, believe it or not, an hour has gone. But one last question, and then the two of you, we can make a brief comment. What's the best way to communicate to everyone in the company that need to change towards lean mentality without making it sound like something that only operations would be interested in?
Well, I think it's what I said to begin with, which is it's what the leader does and what the leader explains to people but what are we trying to do? Why are we trying to do it? What kind of results do we expect? And what's in it for you? If you can answer if you can explain all those things to people, you'll start to get some buy-in and start to move forward. And if you can, use Kaizen in a very aggressive way, I always thought of it that, the target should be 2 Kaizens per week per facility. Now that's a really hard target to meet because Kaizens are very disruptive, or they can be if you do a whole week of Kaizen. But we were able to average that for good parts of the year for quite a long time. We couldn't do it in our busy period with 4 months where our volumes were up 35-40%. We needed all the equipment and we couldn't get at it, but we could do Kaizen in the office at that period. But if you communicate what you're trying to do, why, you set the targets, some stretch targets that are all operational and oriented, focused on the processes, not on the results, and get people out on the floor doing Kaizen and participating in it. When you have someone spend a week doing Kaizen and eliminating waste, it really opens their eyes. They really get excited about it. I've never seen that not happen. And so bit by bit, Kaizen by Kaizen, you're getting the buy-in of the people, and pretty soon you're going to create a Kaizen culture. And if you create a Kaizen culture, you're going to be really, really hard to beat in the marketplace, in my opinion. Very hard certainly a functionally organized company is never going to catch you and never beat you in the market.
Now, I was thinking about the lean transformations I've been involved with, and I'd say there's 2 things here. First, what you try to communicate to everybody is the link between the vision, the challenges that we have from the market, expressing yourselves as problems, and doing Kaizen. No problem, no Kaizen. So there's a very big shift that you tell people we want problems, and that all the tools are about visualizing problems, not solutions. So here, this is something we try to tell everybody, and it's not easy, it's not intuitive. People think problems are a bad thing, and we need to convince everyone, and that goes down to the janitor, that problems are where we make money. The other side of it is then a lean transformation, to me, is just the executives that get TPS, who are willing to learn TPS. So if you look at it from the CEO point of view, you never know how it's going to go. Sometimes, let's say, well, there would be a miracle, but the purchasing manager gets TPS, and then the transformation goes there. And sometimes the finance manager gets TPS, or sometimes operations or whatever. Or you never know who's going to get it and who's not. But the shape of your transformation really depends of who gets it and then who teaches it. So what you have some areas of the organization where they're teaching it down the line, and some areas where they're refusing it, and that kind of shapes the whole thing in terms of what works and what doesn't work. So in terms of communication, there's definitely what Art is saying. You organize for everybody to do Kaizen. And in my case, I organize for everybody to have problem-solving boards, because to get to the Kaizen, to understand why we do Kaizen, and there's this big communication push so that people look at their problems. And the other part is from the CEO trying to convince your executives to understand what this TPS thing is, and to play around with it and to learn from it themselves, and then to mentor somebody else. So it's not easy, but it's relatively simple to do.
I agree with you that I think in a very simple way, communicating to the company that problem solving, visualizing problems, that problems are treasures, problems are good, problems are what will bring the company to a much better financial statement stage. So I think this is one, and this is cultural. I know Brazil. I know I lived in China for 8 years. I know that culturally people tend to hide problems, right? In the lean culture, we want the opposite, make them transparent. And top leaders, senior management, really communicating that, hey, bring up problems, work on the problems, around the problems, Kaizen, Kaizen, Kaizen. So this can motivate, can engage the organization towards let's say a lean company. All right, Art, in respect to your time, I know it's midnight to you right now, right?
Long day.
Very long day. We really myself, and the audience, we really appreciate your time for engaging in this conversation with us. Thank you, Michael. It's an honor. It's a pleasure having the two of you. There are many questions. In 1 hour, it's very short time, but later on, we're going to pick those questions. Michael and I will answer them through our series, Ask Me Anything About Lean. So we take this, and in the upcoming weeks, you have some of our, let's say,
great.
sharing that.
We have a backlog of questions. There we go.
We do our Kanban. Our supermarket now is full.
Yeah, we do have a Kanban. We do have a Kanban. That's Luciana. Luciana handles the Kanban. I can testify that she does.
That's right. Thank you so much,
Art,
Michael.
it's wonderful to see you, and have a great time in Japan. I think
All
I'm
right,
very
thank you, guys.
jealous. I've been stuck in Paris for too long. Wish I could go to Japan. And Dario, same thing about Brazil. It's been too long, man.
It's been too long. Yes, next year maybe.
All right.
All right.
Bye,
Thank you
guys.
so much.
Bye, everybody.